Hi, my name is Gil Robertson, president of the African American Film Critics Association. Today, we are thrilled to be talking to two of our favorite actors about the amazing new film, Biosphere, Mark Duplass and Sterling K. Brown. Hi, guys.
What's going on, Gil? How you doing, man?
Absolutely. We're going to kick things off by introducing you to the African members who are on the call today, starting with Nikki Fowler in Nice, Carolyn Hines in Toronto, Nancy Green in Los Angeles, Philippe Patterson in Washington, D.C., Jill Monroe in Los Angeles.
Right.
Ruben Rigaud in Miami, Florida, Brandon Collins in New York. I'm going to let you guys do what you do so well, and I'll see you on the other side.
None of this is logical. We know that things happen that we cannot explain.
Do you?
We want fast, we want slow, what are we feeling?
You pick.
Ray? Look how sick he is.
Oh God, it's real. We're gonna die. I can't breathe.
Dude.
I gotta spit it out.
The pond seal is solid, and we're sealed in here.
Wait, do you see that?
This is crazy. It looks like the whole world is ending again.
Unless...
What?
I'm gonna find a way to keep us alive. I just need you to believe. There's goodness in change. Some people call it hope. I call it magic. Sometimes you can't explain all the magic in the world.
Dude.
What?
Life finds a way.
You didn't just quote Jurassic Park.
Hey guys, Brandon Constant Media and Popcorn Podcast. I would love to talk about the story and how this just worked out with the you two coming together. So Mark, how did you come up with the story with the director and co-writer Mel Eslin? And what was her pitch to Sterling? And Sterling, what was it about the story that spoke to you as an artist?
Yeah, I sort of birthed the beginning of this story about, two guys are in a dome and they're sort of arguing fiercely about Super Mario Brothers. And I didn't really know where it was going to go, but there was some hints that I would be dealing with some toxic masculinity, some stuff that was honestly bred into me as a man growing up in the South. And I was kind of unwinding that a little bit. And then I brought in Mel because she had this wonderful perspective as sort of like a science geek and as a queer woman. And we ended up building up this whole team with different perspectives. Our producer, Zachary Drucker, who's a trans woman. Yeah. Sterling, who's dealt with his own stuff as like a Black man in St. Louis with the church and homophobia there. And we sort of ended up kind of making something bigger than the sum of its parts through our different perspectives.
I'm trying to remember what the pitch was. Like,
It was very little.
It was very little pitch. Like, hey, I wrote the script. I want to see if you want to jump in the sandbox and play with this. But they were, both him and Mel were so generous and sort of open with me because they've been so close to the project for such a long time that sometimes you wonder if you're going to be able to fit in and play with everybody. And they were so open, generous, and willing to hear whatever kind of insight I might have had about what this character would do in this particular situation, that it felt like family instantaneously. I think when I read it too, I was like, oh, this is big, and this is a little scary for your boy. But I felt like the power of the story and its desire to be out in the world, my desire to see it in the world, superseded whatever fear I might have had about what the character had to go through. And then it was like, all right, how can I best be of service? Like, it was fun. Like, it made me laugh, it made me cry, it made me think. It's all the sweet spots as an artist that I look to do for an audience that it made me do just reading it on the page.
Thank you both very much and great job.
Thanks man.
Hi, I'm Nancy Green with Film Critique.
Hey, Nancy.
And hi, And what I wanted to know is for you, what are some of the most important lessons that you think that people will be able to take away from this movie?
I kind of see this movie as an exploration of the of definition of yourself, your definition of self, and expanding your definition of self. Not having to put people into neat little boxes in order to feel like you understand them, but just meeting people where they are and accepting them for who they are and loving them without any sort of, besides just laughing and having a good ass time at the movies. Like that's something I hope folks take from.
Yeah, I couldn't say that better myself. I hope people walk out with that warm giggle that you have when you realize you've seen a little bit of yourself on screen. May have even lightly pointed to some blind spots that you might have, but you haven't been criticized for that or taken down for that. You've been sort of gently held and ushered into sort of a new purview of how you could look at things.
Yeah.
Hi, Nikki Fowler, Glitter Magazine, coming to you from Cannes. Hi, Sterling. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Nikki.
Hi. My question for you is, outside of probably not wanting to be the last two men on Earth, what did you learn about yourselves after filming this? And do you think you would be able to handle this in real life if you were the two?
I would not be able to handle this, Nikki. I'm not a DIY kind of guy. Like the science that this takes, you know what I'm saying? It reminds me of Damon on the Martin. Like, I'm gonna science the shit out of this. I was yeah, you do it because I can't science the shit out of nothing, Jack. But I did learn, like, as an artist, just how important it is to put yourself into spaces that are just a little bit uncomfortable, because it's through that discomfort that you get a chance to grow, not only as an artist, but as an individual, right? And so, like, there's a couple of spots where I was like, oh goodness, I don't know what's gonna happen here. But I sort of entered into it more with curiosity than with trepidation. And the curiosity allowed me to move through it being like, oh, this is going to be an interesting thing. That's my take. What you got?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of crystallized something that I feel like I intuitively knew, but doubled down on the fact that, you know, in order to bring something into the world as an artist that could be of value, we often feel this pressure that we need to have it fully formed in order to author that. And it really confirmed for me that you don't have to be everything, particularly in a collaborative art form like this, in order for it to have resonance. You know, in my case, I only was able to bring 25% of the script forward before I gave it to Mel, who could co-write with me, and then Zachary, our producer, and Sterling to wonderfully inhabit this role and enrich it with all of his flavors. It really made me confident that, you know, if you just do maybe one thing well, and you surround yourself with a community of like-minded people who, you know, who won't yes man you, who'll challenge you. You know, that can be enough.
Right on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you.
Hi, Carolyn. First, Here's What Happened and Carolyn Talks podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen. Nice to see you this evening.
Right on.
I'll be honest, when I was watching this film, I wasn't sure where it would go. At first, I was like, okay, I kind of like the whole survivalist aspect, you know, the whole two last men stuck on Earth. And it kind of made a film that I saw at South by Southwest, where it was about two people stranded in space, but this one is stranded on Earth. But then as I kept watching it, as someone who grew up in the church, I grew up in the Pentecostal as well as Seventh-day Adventist church, it kind of really spoke to me about a lot about faith, you know, and about how, you know, in church we were told to have faith as small as a mustard seed and anything possible could happen, you know, move the mountain might happen, that kind of thing. And like these two men are like in an impossible situation, and like they're kind of flipping the script on faith and their perceptions on belief and in what is possible in an impossible situation. So I kind of got to the end. It was like, this film is about really believing that you can manifest something like survival, especially surviving. So I want you both to talk about the concept of belief and faith and manifestation that this film is about. Because that's what that's what I read is about. It's about having faith that you can actually manifest, basically, to survive, manifest the will to survive.
I love that. I love that. Like you got the Ted Lasso sign over the top of the movie, like really like believe, you know what I'm saying? That's one of the things that really just sort of spoke to me when I first read it on the page, was sort of like this tangible magic made real idea that permeates throughout the film. And then even also like sometimes we have differing levels of faith. And if your faith is down, then can somebody else's faith help you back up again? That there is no impossible situation. There's just a way. You just have to find your way. That's what really drew me to this movie, probably beyond anything else, because it's a faith walk. What you wrote it. What you got?
I mean, listen, I love so much that you pulled that out of that. I mean, Sterling and I both have our own relationships, not only to belief, magic, but also to the church and the traditional elements of faith, and they're complicated. You know, and for me in particular, I am an optimist. And I'm an optimist in the independent film community, which means I am alone a lot of the time. So to be able to surround myself with someone like Sterling and Mel, who are believers, it was really important for me to not only put that out there, but to live that and experience that for the 3 weeks we made this movie.
Yeah.
Well, 3 weeks? Yeah, that's all about faith right there. But yeah, but I like, especially at the end with the bowling ball, I'm like, yeah, whether you have faith as small as a mustard seed or as faith as big as the bowling ball, and like as you said, like it's about believing that you can actually like make, you know what I'm saying, church, make a way, you got to keep making your way through it, like make your way out of no way. So I think that was one of my biggest takeaways. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Karen. Appreciate you.
Hi guys, my name is Ruben Peralta. One of the things that I love about the movie is everything happens in just on one location. And I think that's it's a fine line between being theatrical and show what cinematic, what cinema is. How did you guys create this fine line and we don't feel that we're watching a play, but instead we're watching a great movie?
Yeah, I mean, we got to give a lot of that up to Mel Eslin, our director. You know, Mel and I co-wrote this together, and we knew we were headed into the pitfalls of small space, only two faces. This could get real boring and repetitive and make people think, why is this not on the stage? Luckily, we had a great production designer, and we had all the visual interests of all the elements of the dome. So you just weren't in an average apartment. You know, you could take in all these things in the background and creating that oblong shape of the dome. Lots of things in deep focus on a second viewing you can see that kind of play into things. But beyond that, then it turns into, okay, now it's on you and me, Brown. We got to be connected and interesting enough to try and hold this stuff, you know? And what happens is with a movie like this is we just play this movie over and over again on our friends, smart peers and filmmakers. And we just say, hit us, man. When are you bored? What's happening? You know? And we just trim it all down until it starts to hit.
Streamline.
Hello, guys. I'm Philippe with Taji Magazine here in DC. My question is for both of you guys. I'm gonna start with Sterling. How do you balance being a scientist engineer with the emotional aspect of it and some of these psychological challenges of living? And Mark, you as well. How do you go from being leader of the free world to now you're in this biosphere where you're not really a leader, you're pretty much just a addition, shall we say?
I think the scientific is balanced with sort of the element of faith that Ray carries from the beginning of the film. Like he's the person that's saying like, we're going to find a way out of here. Now I can use my brain or I can just use the power of belief, but you have to have that faith first in order to know that any sort of machinations that you go through mentally will lead to something that will be of value, right? So I think that he is a man of science and faith simultaneously. So he doesn't see them as being in conflict with one another. He sees them as being congruent with one another.
Yeah. And Billy, as the president, he thinks he's in control. He thinks he's got the power. It's a metaphor for really me in my own life where, listen, I'm a father of 2 daughters and I have thought I was in control for quite a long time. And then one of your daughters turns 15 and everything changes. And I think what's happening for Billy is he's realizing, oh, you know, I've been in control. Now I'm just stuck in this dome and I'm not going to be able to lead anymore. But the hard realization for him is it's actually the same thing. He never had any control. He was never in charge. It was always Billy controlling him. And now it's just really in his face and it's destroying his ego. And that is where, as we all know in this world, mass destruction comes from, is the destruction of the powerful male ego.
Yeah, man, that's good.
Yeah, well, thank you guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you.
Hi, Jill Monroe, RSVP on KBLA. So we've talked about a couple of things here, manifestation, belief, and the small space, but what type of conversations do you hope the audience has after walking away from watching this film?
Oh man, you know what? I would love two people who are really close and trust each other and know each other. They walk out and they're feeling a little warm and they're feeling a little giggly and they're feeling like maybe a couple of small blind spots were pointed out in them and how they look at humans, some of their limited purview of humanity, but they're feeling like they didn't get called out by the movie. They didn't get body slammed. They didn't try to get canceled on Twitter from it. They were gently held and walked towards some level of growth. And they were able to do it inside of the warm giggle. That's the dream for me.
That's good. That's good. I mean, in concert with that, just being able to love people a little more fully and accepting people as they are, without having to have any sort of caveat for how you love them. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'll pray for you. You don't have to pray for me or say anything else. You can just be here with me as I am. And we good. We Gucci. That's what I hope.
Amazing. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Kumbaya.
I always like to hear about the challenges that folks experience. And obviously, this is a very complex story, and I imagine a complex shoot. Can you each tell me about the most challenging day on set and what the other did to support you during that time?
What was the most challenging day on set? I would say technically it was probably the beginning of the film, right? Technically, well, but it wasn't necessarily us. It was our cameraman,
right,
who had to run backwards, like around this loop, like as many times as necessary for us to finish the
forwards, trying to get a oneer.
Yeah,
and he's running backwards with a Steadicam rig. Yeah.
That was probably like most of the time I was like, I'm trying to stay focused on the scene. And I was like, man, are you okay? Like my man was sweating, looking like a burro, like pulling some sort of hoe around. I was like, bro, I'm making sure he doesn't pass out from exhaustion. So that was probably like technically probably one of the biggest things. Then what else is there? I mean, like there's all kinds of emotional things. I would say emotionally, when you begin to challenge Ray about like you got some sort of arousal out of him. That was probably one of the most emotionally charged days, because you're forcing someone out of their comfort zone and it doesn't feel good at all. And so and nastiness can spring out of that. And I think you were even saying like that's such a fine line, because we don't want to lose our audience, but we also want to be truthful to that moment. This would not be an easy moment for that character.
There's a scene where we're throwing a medicine ball back and forth, and then we shot that scene right after lunch. And I was feeling a little gassy. And when you're catching a medicine ball from Sterling K. Brown, it comes with a little bit of heft and velocity because he's a little strong. But, you know, I'm staying in the scene, but, you know, I got my legs up, I got my core engaged, and one of those hits was a little too strong. And a little toot popped out. But when it's on concrete, you know, it kind of goes louder, you know, and the dome's kind of quiet, you know? But everybody was so professional, man. They were so cool, and nobody said anything. We kept going with the scene. It's like the one person, my true collaborator, Mel, my director, the woman who runs my company, just doubled over, cracking up laughing, and blew the take. So that was a little bit of a bummer, but I made it through.
Yeah, I'm gonna support you. I stay with the scene. It's all good.
I appreciate the stories, gentlemen.
Right on, bro.
So before I talked about manifestation and belief and like the importance of that and like whoo, but there was something that throughout the film, closest from the second half, where the egg is born and the impossible becomes impossible and adaptation, all this goes on. And in my head, I'm thinking, have you guys thought about what's gonna happen when you die? And when I thought about that, I mean with regards to like the baby, like okay, I'm like yes, new life is coming. This is great. Like the impossible has been made possible. And then I just thought, okay, so what's gonna happen to this child now? And in my head, it was just thinking, this is sometimes where, you know, where we say, okay, we prepare for this thing is gonna happen, but then we don't think about the consequences. And I was actually kind of surprised that Ray never mentions that, because he's the logical one, he's a pragmatic one. And and that's just me. And back in my head, was like, what was going to happen to the baby? So I wanted the two to talk about what happens next with the baby. Like, what did you guys have any discussions about that? Because
I'll say from my perspective, like the magic that's happening inside of the dome, I think is also paralleled by magic that's happening outside of the dome. I think that atmosphere, like we talk about, I think that there is life beyond us, or at least life beyond us is returning to where we can exist beyond this space, and that there may be other people. Because I don't think that Ray would have wanted to bring forth life if the potential for it to move forward was not a real thing. Even though he's sort of concerned about it, I think that there's a renewed faith in the possibilities outside of where we are.
I think Ray believes in a green light. I think the green light is hope, and he doesn't know what that's going to bring, and that's enough for Ray.
Yeah.
Yeah, because in my head I was thinking, because this film has a lot of biblical connotations to me anyway. So like growing up in the Bible, people always say, oh, it's just Adam and Eve. But I always remember in Sunday school and then in Sabbath school, you'd always say Adam and Eve were the first, but they weren't the only. God, I always believe that God created other people outside of Adam and Eve. They were just the first two, and they were sequestered in the Garden of Eden, but there was a whole civilization going on. So I was just thinking the two of them think they were the only two, but in my head I was thinking they weren't the only two. So therefore, henceforth, we're not beyond the green line, beyond the border of the hills that they're looking at. There's a whole other civilization. So
I think that can work.
I like it.
I think that can work.
So that's my headcanon.
Guys, usually in post-apocalyptic movies, we never see two characters of the same sex surviving and trying to make something new. When you guys had the first meeting to check on the script, why the approach was to make it mostly a comedy instead of something dramatic or something with more action? Because I find it fascinating that you guys choose to be a comedy instead of something different than we usually see in cinema in the past 20 years. That it has to be something or pursuing something or trying to find something to large life. But this is just to survive, but with a good humor.
Yeah. So I would say, as the co-screenwriter and producer of this film, my intention was a little different than how you framed it, respectfully, is that, I don't see it as just a comedy or just a drama. And most of the movies I make exist somewhere in the spectrum in between. And I think that, our feeling was, it'll be a good thing if people can find warmth and humor in this story. And I think it will be a good thing if we allow the moments to sometimes play funnier and sometimes play more serious. And what we found that's interesting with this movie is that depending on who's watching it and who they're watching it with, it can play a lot more comedic or a lot more dramatic. You watch this movie in a big movie theater, there's a lot of big laughs, and that laughter is contagious, and people get on board. You watch this movie at night at home with two kind of serious people, it's not a lot of laughs. And they still have a successful viewing. They just have a more dramatic viewing. So a lot of it is about what you bring to it.
Well, what I like is something that you say. You say that they think they're in control, but it's post-apocalyptic. Like, what else you can control after the world ends? And I think that's like a dark humor behind everything.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay, this is Philippe from Taj Mag again. What would you want to be most memorable about your characters in this film?
I would say for Ray is the ability to accept Billy for who he is, like to accept Billy for Billy. I think, and I don't know if that would have been something that would have been possible for him at the beginning of the film, right? And I think that he starts off as his best friend and he ends as his best friend.
Yeah.
And Billy is still Billy, like same person, you know what I mean? So that'd be
I love that. I'd double down on that. It's like if you look at a couple who's in therapy, the therapist would say to them, like, listen, if you've come here to try and change the other person, this is the wrong place to do this. You have to learn how to accept them as they are, but also you can put in some work and you can have a gentle hope that there may be evolution and change towards that. But your ability to accept them and be with them shouldn't be predicated on that. And I find in my own relationships that once you accept someone and you're willing to work a little bit towards growing towards them, you actually do end up changing each other gently in a nice way and growing towards each other. And I love that that's possible for two guys like Billy and Ray, who at the beginning of this film are nowhere near capable of that kind of growth.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that towards the end. I was just like, yeah, this is definitely a sign of growth between the two.
Oh, thank you, man.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Hi, it's Jill again. So I want to ask about Billy and Ray. We often, when we talk to actors or we talk about creating characters, we want to know what is most similar to you in your life. But I want to know from both of you, what was it within each characterization that you had a harder time maybe finding, or something that was so far away from you that you were had to learn to connect with through the character?
I got mine. I can say right away.
Go ahead.
Because I decided personally to be an independent filmmaker and come into an industry that I didn't feel like had any interest in having me there, and it was such an uphill battle, it beat every sense of entitlement out of me completely. So I have zero entitlement left in me. Billy is completely entitled and has failed upwards his entire life by doing nothing. And he expects those around him who are smarter than him, more capable than him, to raise him up. And when he doesn't get it, he pouts like a petulant little boy. And that, for me, I think when I'm at my worst, I've certainly had those moments. But for me to deeply connect into that, honor that, see the humanity in that, put that up, was a little bit of a challenge to find my way into.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like I would say, and my friends would call me on this, like, I don't think I lead with my intellect. I feel like I lead with my spirit, and sort of like playing someone who's so heady is probably not, I mean, it's not super far away from me. I'm not like, I don't know.
No, but you're always heart connected. You use your head, but
Yeah.
you're always heart connected.
Yeah, I'm a very heart connected person.
Yeah.
So just trying to come from a place of leading with the brain was probably a little bit different for me.
Yeah, I never thought about that, but it's like Ray probably had to disconnect from his heart with a lot of the communication in order to keep things going with Billy.
Yeah.
Because there'd be too much pain and hurt in there. So
Agreed.
yeah.
Amazing. Thank you both so much.
Right on, Joe.
Mark and Sterling, we thank you for your time today. We are so looking forward to this film. It's a wonderful project, and we predict good things for it.
Right on, man. Thank you, Gil.
Thank you, Gil.
Absolutely, absolutely. On behalf of the world's largest group of Black film and TV critics, thank you for joining us today on this edition of the AAFCA Roundtables. Have a great day.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, gentlemen.
Bye.
Peace out. Take it easy.